Hello, hello. My name is Kim Addis. I'm the president and founder of Frame of Mind Coaching and the co-founder of the Journal That Talks Back. Today, you have joined the Frame of Mind Coaching podcast with my co-host, Fernekotlyar, who happens to be my daughter. There you go. We just changed it. You're officially my co-host. Welcome, Fernie.
Wow, big upgrade. Thank you.
I know. I think it's time. So today we also have a guest, and this is not just any guest. He's actually my coach. I believe that every coach needs a coach. I live by it, breathe by it, die by it. So here's my coach. And I'm happy, pleased, proud to introduce Denim Slade to the podcast. Denim, welcome.
Thank you. I'm thrilled to be here and really excited to talk to both of you and to talk about what we're talking about today. So thanks.
Okay, well, let's give people a little bit of background. You live in Utah, and it's kind of funny to me that I have a coach in Utah because Kim Addis, who grew up in Montreal as an Egyptian Jew, suddenly has a coach from the other side of almost the world for me. It's a little bit funny, and you can even see like what's sitting in your background. Is that like a horse whip or something?
Yeah,
what is that?
it's a lasso.
It's a lasso. So yeah. I'm working with a cowboy, which is hilarious. It's about as diametrically opposed to me as a person could possibly find, but very cool. You weren't always a coach. Where did you start off? Give us a little bit of background.
Well, what's even funny is that I'm not a cowboy. We lived in Texas for 10 years before, and so I had a bunch of Texas stuff that I had decorated my office in. And so in Utah, it's just a cowboy, but in Texas, it's Texas. So I'm not a very cowboy, but I have my doctorate from Ohio State, and I was a therapist for over 20 years before moving into coaching about 2.5 or 3 years ago. And so I've been working, one-on-one and with couples and families for over 25 years, and have developed. I've taken my 10 years of education and 20 plus years of experience and developed some tools that research has shown and clinical experience has shown to be really helpful to help people make changes in their lives. And so.
And we're gonna get there, but why did you switch from therapy to coaching? Like, a lot of people want to know what's the difference.
Yeah, that's a really good question. So one of the main differences between coaching and therapy is that in therapy, you're working with people with diagnosed disorders, or you're treating diagnosed disorders like depression or anxiety or bipolar or borderline personality disorder. And so moving into coaching enables me to expand my practice so that I can work with people in Canada. I've got clients in the Netherlands and in Mexico and all over the United States, and you can't do that as a therapist. And so it allows me to be able to expand my practice. And in coaching, you're really taking people who are normally doing pretty well in their lives and want to do better. And a lot of times in therapy, you're taking people that are not necessarily doing very well in their lives and trying to get them kind of to a baseline of doing okay.
So you're saying it's a bit more inspiring.
Can be a bit more inspiring, changes the population. I no longer work with, mental illness and those kinds of things, but it's not a whole lot different than how I've always worked. Frankly, I've always really focused on trying to help people make changes in their lives and develop the lives and the relationships that they want to have.
Okay, so one of the things that by the way that I met Denim was I was on his podcast, and I'm on a lot of podcasts and I talk to a lot of people, but after I spoke to Denim after the podcast was over, actually what happened was, if I remember correctly, we kind of messed up the timing on the podcast.
We did.
We messed up the timing on the podcast. And when we got to the podcast, I realized there wasn't going to be enough time for him to interview me. So given my nature, I took the bull by the horns.
Took
Is
the
that the
reins.
expression? I took the reins and I actually flipped the interview around and I interviewed Denim instead of him interviewing me. And I found that what I was learning was really interesting. It kind of drew me in, and that's how I ended up starting to work with him. But at the very beginning, you made me do something called a core assessment. So maybe you can describe that. What is that? Who made that? Why was it developed? Just give us a little bit of background on that.
Yeah. Before I do that, I also just have to say that those of you that are fans of this podcast and of Kim and Ferne ought to know that that really what you see is what you get. And Kim is, I don't know Ferne well yet, but Kim is an amazing person, and what's under the surface and behind the scenes is just as wonderful as what you see week in and week out in these podcasts. And so,
and yes, I do pay him for that.
you don't pay me for that. It's very true. So yeah, so I have always been really fascinated with personality. And when you're in the business of helping people change, it's really important to be able to know and understand the things that you can change and that are changeable, and things that are not changeable. And personality has been studied for decades now and has been shown to not be changeable. And a lot of us spend a lot of time trying to change aspects of ourselves that are not only not changeable, but that are not broken. And so it's much more effective to understand those aspects and work within and learn how to be a healthier version of who we are than to try to change who we are. And
so give us an example of something that is not changeable.
Yeah. So what C.O.R.E gets at is the underlying, is temperament. So there's a little bit of a difference between temperament and personality. And temperament is has been studied again for decades. And temperament is what we come into life with. We come into life with an underlying motivation that drives why we do the things that we do and why we don't do the things that we don't do. And so over the course of the years of working with people, I'd come across, there are lots of assessments out there and lots of really good things, but I'd never found one that was really consistent with what I saw working with people day in and day out, or they were so complicated that most people had a hard time implementing them into their lives. And so about 10 years ago, I decided to start collecting data of my own, and I have a PhD. And so I know how to do research. And so I spent about 3 years collecting data, and then about 1.5 years analyzing that data. And C.O.R.E is the result of it. And so C.O.R.E is a personality or temperament framework and model that really gets at the underlying reasons of why we do what we do. So you, Kim, are an RO. So the C.O.R.E is an acronym. Each letter represents a different temperament or personality type. And most people have a pretty dominant primary type, and then a pretty substantial secondary type as well. And so Kim's dominant type is R, which stands for resolution, and her secondary type is O, which stands for optimism. And we can get into that. And Ferne just took the test a couple of days ago. I was looking at your results earlier, and you came back as an RE, right?
Mm-hmm.
So give us all the letters and tell us what they all mean.
Yeah. So again, C.O.R.E. So it's C.O.R.E. And so the first personality or temperament type stands for comfort and connection. And so C's are motivated by comfort, comfortable clothes, comfortable furniture, comfortable emotions. C's very proactively structure their lives to create comfort and to avoid discomfort. And I don't know how in depth we want to go there, but that's what the C stands for. O stands for optimism, and O's are motivated by fun. They're motivated by pleasant emotion. O's are the most people oriented, they live in the present. O's do most everything in their lives to create an enjoyable and emotional environment. They have a hard time with conflict. They have a hard time planning for the future because they don't want to get they don't want to commit to something and then when the time comes, either have a better option that they would want to do, or feel locked in and have to create some conflict to get out. R stands for resolution, and R's are the movement makers in our society. R's are motivated by getting things done, and they are the only temperament type that lives in the future. And so they're constantly looking at what is next. And they love to make lists. They love to have several things moving forward at once. Ours have a tremendous
You know how
amount.
many lists I have?
I can imagine.
Not only lists, you tell everybody else to make lists.
That's right. Did you make a list?
Yeah. And Ferne, that's actually a really good example, because we tend to think that the most efficient way for somebody to function is the way that works for us. And we tend to think that other people's brains work the way that our brains work. But that's, ours are super passionate. They, when something comes on our radar, it's all that they see. It's all that exists. And all of their energy goes into getting whatever that is done. If an R can't create movement, they'll move to something that they can create movement on. So it's R's don't sit in something that they can't move. And the result is getting it done. You know, one of the interesting things about the R, since you both have R in you, we'll talk about this for just a second. When something comes to the attention of an R, when something is unresolved, it creates emotional strain for the R. And it doesn't, like if the keys are lost or the remote is lost, or, you know, there's something that is undone. And by getting it done, by checking that thing off the list, it resolves that emotional discomfort. Most R's, depending on the secondary type, but most R's, when they get something done, don't spend a lot of time saying, oh, look at this thing that I did, look at this thing that I made, or look at this paper that I wrote, or whatever. Once what drives that resolution is that it's no longer bugging them. And so frankly, most R's, you know, if every T isn't crossed or every I isn't dotted, it doesn't create a lot of strain, because what's driving them is this drive to get it done. And then they move on to something else that they can then get done. And then E stands for exactness. And E's bring quality to society. The E brain naturally looks at anything and everything and sees the best, how to make it better. It doesn't matter whether it's how to load the dishwasher, how to arrange the closet, how to drive from point A to point B, how to have a conversation. The E brain looks at what has happened and sees how to improve it for the next time. I don't use never and always very often, but I don't believe that I've ever heard an E say something was perfect. There's always something that could make it better. And so E's live in the past because they're looking at what has occurred to make it better for the future. E's have a lot of confidence in their own conclusions. E's think through things very thoroughly, and they settle on the best way, the right way. And so if you disagree with an E, their tendency is to think that you're wrong. Not that you're stupid, but if you knew what they knew, or if you had the pieces of data that they had, you would also obviously land on the same conclusion that they've landed on. E's are their thoughts become very precious to them. They almost become like treasures. So C's are motivated very much by emotion and emotional comfort. E's are motivated by logic and thoughts. And so if you ask an E a question, they will frequently kind of do an assessment of the likelihood of you really caring, you really wanting to know. because if an E is going to share something with you, they're going to share the whole story. They're going to walk you through how they landed where they landed. And so if they don't think that you're going to really care, or if you're just sort of asking just out of social, appropriateness or whatever, then they're not going to open up. But if they do open up, they're going to tell you the whole story. So anyway, that's kind of a brief overview of what C.O.R.E is.
And
So you go ahead.
I was just going to say, do you think that everybody fits into one of these categories or kind of a combination? Are there people who don't fit these boxes?
No, they're not. Again, you can have, aspects of most of them, but I haven't met anybody who doesn't, because there again, I created a model that describes what's going on in life, right? But I didn't create personality or temperament, and so all I've done with C.O.R.E is describe and explain phenomenon that are occurring, and so I think the model is pretty good, and I think the research is pretty extensive, and so.
And can you tell us a little bit about this research? What did you do in terms of that data collection, in terms of research, the analysis, all of that?
There's another PhD student talking to a PhD.
And a very E question. Good job, Bernie.
Thanks.
So I spent 3 years interviewing people, and so I would ask them about underlying motivations. Had a set of questions that I asked, and I also, anytime somebody said something about why they did what they did, I wrote it down, word for word what they said. And so I collected these huge set of data, qualitative data, and then as I started going through the process of analyzing it, the data, the qualitative data points that I collected categorized into these, clustered around these 4 temperament types, and so then I developed an assessment to go with that, and I continued to interview more people, and to continue to validate the model and the assessment. So
interesting.
So I have a question. Sorry.
Okay, sorry, go for it.
I have a question. You said that O people live in the moment, but R people are future focused. So I'm an R and an O. So how do they coexist in one human?
Probably not very well. So that can be the RO combination. Is actually one of my favorite combinations too. My wife is an RO, and so it depends also on how much of your secondary type there is. So an R that is like an 80% R and 20% O will look very different than somebody who's like a 55% R and a 45% O. But that juxtaposition inside can create conflict. So my daughter, my oldest daughter, is an EO, and she's a lot of both. She's a primary E, but she's like probably 52% E and 48% O. And so she talks a lot about this internal push and pull of these 2 motivations. I'll give you an example, a concrete example. She's actually one of my healthy and happy coaches. She's my E coach, and we have weekly coach trainings, and Rachel's also in law school, and so she's pretty busy. And so last week, right before our coach's training, she called me and said, "Dad, Sydney's here, and she's begging me." Sydney's my other daughter, begging me to go to lunch because I was going to Guatemala with Sydney later that day. And my daughter Sydney is an O, and so she wanted to have some fun with her sister before she left. And so here's this internal conflict that gets created between Rachel's E responsibility and doing the right thing, and her O, here's an opportunity to have some fun that just presented. what do I want to do? And so she felt this push and pull of wanting to blow off the meeting and go have fun with her sister, and wanting to be responsible and do the things that she had committed to do. How she resolved that is she wanted me to make the decision for her and bail her out of that conflict, which I didn't do. I left it with her. And so what she did is she took the meeting with her to lunch and went to lunch with Sydney and was on the meeting trying to participate. But that really can create a lot of push and pull internally. So like the RO, the R will be pulled into future planning, wanting to get things done. The present never quite catches up for the R. By the time the present catches up to now, the R brain is already on to what's coming next. And go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Are there any temperaments that go well together?
Yeah, you can make any combination work. I get that question a lot, especially when it comes to dating or marriage or, serious commitment. But do you mean internally or relational?
Yeah, internally is what I was referring to. Because you mentioned that RO kind of has that internal conflict. Are there some that don't have that conflict?
No, because they're all motivated by different things, right? There are some that create less conflict. Like I'm an OC, and O's and C's go together pretty well. And so I don't have a lot of internal conflict. R's and E's are the most intense. Their intensity is a little bit different, but they're the most intense of the types. And so when there's an R or an E element, it tends to create a little more conflict just because of the intensity of the drive.
So just saying, you are an R, I'm an R, but Alan is an E. Like
Adrien is an E too.
So,
yeah.
So Adrien is Fernie's boyfriend. So, and Alan is my husband. So when you and Alan, for example, butt heads, as you sometimes do, now you kind of maybe know why.
Well, in your second, go ahead, Fernie.
No, you can go for it.
No, you go. What were you going to say?
No, I was just going to ask if having this perspective of the assessment, does it change the way you see people? Because she mentioned that, now you know why. Does it change the way you see people? And Mom, if it changes the way you look at the world as well?
Do you want to go first, Kim, or do you want me to go?
Well, for me, I mean, learning that Alan has certain tendencies, like, Denim mentioned, Alan always picks like the right way to get somewhere. If we have 3 or 5 errands to run, he's like, okay, first we're going to go here, then we're going to go here, then we're going to go here. It makes sense, right? Because we're going in this direction and it's like the shortest way. And so he always pre-plans it. He always needs to tell whatever, he needs to use ways to get to wherever we're going, even though we know where we're going. I don't need to know where we're going. But he needs to know how long it's going to take and if there's going to be traffic and all of this stuff, right? So all of a sudden, I now understand where all of that's coming from. Whereas before, it would just like kind of bug me, right? Now I'm like, oh, right, that's where it's coming from.
Yeah.
So for me, it helps me understand him a little bit better, his need to create a certain experience or an environment that's as smooth as possible. That's why we give him all the tasks related to travel and administration and all of that stuff. He's the best one for it. But at the same time, sometimes I don't need somebody to tell me where to go. Right?
Or how to get there.
Or how to get there. Sometimes I don't need Waze talking in the background. Sometimes I like to not know where I'm going. Sometimes I like to take a different route. Sometimes I'm like, hey, let's turn here and see what exists here, because that's my nature.
That's
right?
your ownness.
Right. So I'm a little bit more spontaneous. And so sometimes I need to interject and kind of throw his plans out the window. But also now he kind of knows where it's coming from.
Yeah, and I think that this is actually one of the most important aspects of temperament and personality, Fernie. It's a really good question, and I'll use I'll use a C or an E as an example. So C's and E's, neither one of them hardly ever say anything without thinking it through first. C's and E's are the most internal processing. So like for an R, almost everything that comes into the R brain comes out of the R mouth. They're very what you see is what you get. And so you don't have to wonder what else is going on behind the scenes. But a C or an E has so much going on inside and so much that they're processing, and they hardly ever say something without thinking it through first. And so if you've got a C that is in a relationship with an R, we tend to think, like I said before, we tend to think that other people do things for the same reasons that we do them. And so R's pop off all the time.
What does pop off mean?
Yeah, good question.
Oh, maybe that's a Western thing. I don't know. Pop off means just whatever comes in their mouth comes out of, or comes into their head, comes out of their mouth. They just like, if you think, oh, that's a dumb idea, or no, you shouldn't do that. You should do this, or that's what popping off is. They're no filter. And so if you've got a C that's in a relationship with an R who is just like popping off all the time. I need a better word. How would you say that?
Speaking freely.
Yeah.
Unfiltered. Unfiltered.
Yeah, unfiltered is a good way. Who's speaking unfilteredly. Then a lot of times, and also, so an R will say something that they feel or think in the moment, and then 5 minutes later, they might be thinking or feeling something completely differently. And I've had a lot of clients who will come back and say, my husband, 15 years ago said that he didn't like this about me or whatever. And the husband will be like, I don't think that. And the C will be, but you said that. And so understanding the way that the R brain works in that is really powerful for the C to understand that that if the C said that, it would be very intentional. It would be what they felt, what they really thought. They would have really thought about it before they ever said it. And so then they assume that that's what's happened inside of the R brain as well. And so they put a lot of stock in that. When in reality, it's very different. Does that make sense?
So Ferne is an RE, so those seem to clash as well.
RE is a really interesting combination. It's a super powerful combination because R's get a lot done and E's do things really well. And so REs get a lot done well. Now, emotionally, that can be really intense. I mentioned that those are the two most intense. R's intensity is like a stick of dynamite. When there's an obstacle in front of the R intensity flares up and out really fast. So it's like, so their energy is really good at blowing through obstacles. And then they get over things really quickly. You can have a pretty good fight with an R, and literally, so this happens in my marriage all the time. We'll have a fight, and then my wife's name is Ellen. Ellen will be like, how long are you going to stay mad? Well, we just like 30 seconds ago ended this thing. So it might take me a minute, but the R shifts gears really quickly and gets over things really quickly because their intensity, again, is like a stick of dynamite and they live in the future. The E's intensity is like flowing lava. It's like a diesel train. E's have this tenacity to slog through things in order to do them the right way. And so their intensity is just like a freight train or flowing lava that will just blow, they're not going to like knock you out of the way, but they're just going to keep going and just try to stop them. And so they're super intense, but they're not like overtly or outwardly intense. They're just internally going to keep chugging.
So and that means when Ferne has something that she absolutely wants to do, when she's determined, She 100,000% gets it done. She does it. Even
Right.
if people around her don't believe that it's feasible, she still does it. She's got
Right.
this like, you used to say, we used to say, and I still say, you're one of the toughest people I know. You are the toughest. You're the strongest person I know. It's very, very true.
Thank
Like
you.
Yeah.
if she's running a race and she's in pain, doesn't matter. She keeps going.
Right. Yeah. And
I don't.
Well, the pain will stop eventually.
when the
See, I
task is
don't.
done, right?
No.
Yeah. When you're there, then it can stop.
And that's the strength of the E. That E tenacity is really, really good. R's and O's, neither one have a very high tolerance for hassle. R's don't like hassle because they don't like things that get in the way of their being able to get things done. And
That's
so,
why I'm very super. I believe in efficiency on all matters.
right,
Efficiency and practicality. If it's not efficient and practical, pick another plan.
right. And for the E brain, that may not be the best way to do something.
Well, and for Fernie, her morals, her ethics take precedence over practicality.
Shouldn't
Yeah. Go ahead, Bernie.
they? No, I
Shouldn't
just
they?
said, shouldn't they? Like,
Not always. And what I mean by that is sometimes it's okay to
if you say take an Uber.
take an Uber. Right? Sometimes it's okay to pay a little more for rent because it's closer to the university. Sometimes it's okay to do those things, even though it rubs against your sense of fairness. That's the word I'm after.
Yeah. Fairness and justice are huge for the E brain. There is a right way to do things, and there's all other ways. And fairness and justice is huge for that E brain. You're hitting at something that's really, really important here too, in understanding how the E brain works. So whatever the goal or the objective is going to determine what the right or the best way is, right? And so if efficiency is the goal. So an example that I think of all the time is backpacking. I like to backpack, and so if an E is going backpacking and the goal is speed and efficiency, then the E is going to think of like the lightest shoes, the lightest pack, easy food. It's going to be all about the best way to make it efficient. But if the goal is comfort and enjoying the scenery, then the right way is going to be very different, right? They're going to have a heavy pack that has a nice thick mattress. They're going to, have steaks to cook. They're going to take their
That's
time.
Lewis.
Stops. Right. So whatever the objective is what's going to determine what the right way is. Does that make sense?
I think so. And so you mentioned kind of internal conflict. What about the connection between people? Are there
Relational?
Yeah, relational, but do the same temperaments conflict, or do they come together? Do they complement each other?
Well, both. So your mom mentioned our onus with Alan's enus, right? And so there's and probably some of the same dynamic that occurs between the two of you. The R is going to be pulling things forward and wanting to get things done and not wanting to sit and debate and marinate in a decision. And an E will take as long as it takes to decide and to execute. And for the E, it doesn't matter if it's going to be, a 15-year trajectory. If they get their plan set, again, like a freight train, they'll chug on that for 15 years. Well, if you say to an R, okay, we're going to do this, and it's going to take you 15 years, they're going to be like, are you, So yeah, there are certainly combinations that work easier. Every temperament type has very predictable strengths and very predictable challenges. Things that are conducive to being healthy and things that are in the way of being healthy. And so if you know that and understand that, because again, these things are not changeable. You cannot change why your underlying temperament of why you do the things that you do. It's not changeable. And so when you understand that, it changes the way that you interpret what they're doing. So if your mom knows that your e-brain is making these decisions about about housing or about taking an Uber or not, then she's gonna be less frustrated with you. She still might not agree, but she's going to understand, assign a different meaning to why you're being stubborn, right? Why do you have to be so set in your ways? Why does it always have to be your way? Well, if I understand that you're an E, I understand that internal conflict. And if you understand that you're an E, then you can understand that your brain is going to say, well, yeah, my way is the right way. And my default is to have very little tolerance for somebody thinking differently than I think. Then you can manage it. You can't change that propensity, but you can manage it behaviorally, if that makes sense.
Do you think that you can change the rough proportions of how much, like if you're an RE, can you change like from 50% to 75 type of thing? Or is it just like the first time you take the test, that's it, that's what it is for the rest of your life? And if you take it 5 years later, you're going to get the same results?
Well, so there's a little bit different between the test and your temperament. I created the test, right? And it was pretty hard to create because, again, I'm trying to get at the underlying reason why you do things. So I love it when I know somebody who takes the assessment. The assessment might not be right because it's self-report and it's a questionnaire, right? And so the statistics on it are pretty good, and I'm continually watching those. But your underlying who you are is not going to change.
So, sorry, you mentioned the statistics. How would you kind of assess whether or not it's accurate?
So what I've done up to this point, and I've got enough data now that I can start running some factor analyses. But what I've done is I've looked at every question, because what you want a question to do is you want, so as an R, as a primary R, on a given question, you want the R to choose the R response, and you don't want C's, O's, or E's to choose that response, right? You want them to say, no, that's not me. And you want the R to say, yeah, that is me. And so I started out with 24 questions. Again, I had tons of people. I interviewed people that I knew were all, and I created these things. And so I look at, and I could show you the spreadsheet, but I look at every question and see how many C's are choosing, what the percentage of C's that are choosing the C answer. And
so these are people you already know that are C's.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's based on personal assessment of them and in reference to the question.
Well, that's what it started with. Now I've got a pretty big data set that, and so now I can see that people that are coming back as a C, on it's a 12 questionnaire at this point. And so I can see, how many C's, percentage of C's that are choosing different answers across those 12. And so now it's everybody that takes it becomes part of the statistical analysis. If that makes sense.
All the technical questions.
Yes.
For anyone wants to know how it works. All right. So here's my kind of rounding it up.
At all about that.
Not at all. But here's my rounding it off question. My rounding it off question is, if somebody wants to take an assessment and figure out what they are, C.O.R.E. or E, can they do that? Will you permit that to happen? And if so, how do they find you?
Yes. Yeah. Go to denimslade.com.
Denim like the jeans.
Denim like the jeans. DENIMSLADE.com. And the assessment is there. You can take it. You'll get results. And you can, and then you can communicate with me if you have any questions about it. I'm obviously a little bit biased, but I think relationally it's a game changer if you really understand, and that's your relationship with yourself, right? As well as your relationships with the important people in your life. as as an owner of an organization, knowing what each job is and what the tasks are, there are strengths and personalities. When I hire somebody, I know that, this job is really well suited for an E. In fact, I'm hiring somebody right now, and I want an OE. I'm looking for somebody to help me with some social media, so I want some onus in there, but I need excellence, and I need some precision. And so as I interview people, I know that the skill set I want is an OE skill set. And so it's really, and then, like you said, Kim, relationally, when you understand why, I think, and there's data that backs this up, well over 90% of the conflict that occurs comes from misunderstanding one another. And C.O.R.E is so powerful in helping somebody know how to interpret why somebody's doing what they're doing.
Well, I think it's been very interesting for me to learn my own personality and more. I mean, it also helps me understand why sometimes I take 10 steps forward and 5 steps backwards, but that's me. And it has definitely helped me understand how Alan thinks. I mean, just in terms of how we relate to each other, what drives him, what's important to him. And to some degree now we can, instead of getting frustrated about it, we can laugh about it. And so that's useful as well. But I want to thank you for being a guest on our show, for sharing your work, for working with me as well. It's been amazing. And Ferne, you get the last word. Any last thoughts? You can wrap it up.
Lucky me. Yeah, I think it was really interesting as well. And same, like my partner is also an E, so it's also really interesting to see that dynamic. But thank you again. I've heard so much about you, so it was really nice to finally meet you. And I guess see you next time.
Thank you. I appreciate you having me. It's been a fun conversation.
For those of you who are listening, if you want more information on the C.O.R.E assessment, go to denimslade.com. And we would love to hear your thoughts on this particular episode. It's a little bit different from the norm, so please reach out to us. Ferne, how do they reach you?
Please email me. My email is fernekotlyar@live.com. So fernekotlyar@live.com.
You can also, sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
You can also find me on Instagram or Facebook. Instagram, it's Become Healthy and Happy. And then on Facebook, it's Denim Slade.
And you can get me at Kim@frameofmindcoaching.com. We will see you next week. Have a good one, everyone.